My name is Tom Dougherty, and I'm going to interview my mother and father, James and Doris Dougherty. Gene Brassey is going to be filming this on the 24th day of October, 1997, and we're looking forward to having a good time of interview. We'd like to ask James some questions first, and so let's turn to James and start asking. Dad,
Yes.
we'd like to ask you some questions about some ancestors on your mother's side. Where did your mother come from as far as location?
Well, from Farmersville, California. She was born in California, but her mother came from Woodlake, up in Woodlake area, and her relatives lived up there. And one of the Sweeney boys had bought a lot of the property that they owned up there at one time.
When was your mother born? Do you remember?
Oh dear, oh dear. You know, I was going to look that up. I don't remember. I think in 1903, I think, or 1901, at this side of Hanford.
Well, she was born in 1903, and you were born in 1916. That means you were 13 when she was 13 when you were born.
She's older than that.
Well, maybe.
Well, I don't know how.
When did she die?
65.
1965 at age?
At 72.
That means she was born in about 1896. Okay.
I don't know how
Yeah.
they always. Oh well, maybe they moved from this place to Farmersville in 1903.
Yeah, that was probably it.
On the ranch.
So they settled in Farmersville, California?
Yes.
What, describe your mother's appearance. What was she like size-wise and such?
Well, she was a very strong lady. She was, I think, 5'7.5", and when she was a young girl, before she got married, I guess, she had a 22-inch waistline. And then she got heavier, and she weighed around 180, as I remember. But she was a hard-working woman, even when she was 60 years old. I took a course in Charles Atlas, and I was a strong fella. Called me Powerhouse Dougherty in the football squad in high school. I'd grab her by the hands or the wrist. She'd break away like she was Samson. I was Twigs.
Okay. Is there any story that comes to mind that you think of about your mother, just off the top of your head, something that sticks out?
Well, we was going to run away from her around the house, and she grabbed the buggy whip, and she chased around the house, and then she'd get close enough, she snips us with that whip. We didn't run anymore after that.
What do you remember about, I'm going to ask you a couple questions about your father. Describe him, his personality, his appearance, his character.
Dad had, as I remember him first, he had these teeth in front here, well, 4 of them, all gold. They were gold teeth. And he was a fellow who could walk on his hands. I have a picture in the album back there where him walking on his hand. He was strong. He was a good wrestler. The Japanese came in to prune the peach trees and apricot trees and different things, and he would wrestle with them. And he used to box. He was a boxer. And even way back up when he was, I don't know, 40 years old or something, he was pretty, maybe not quite that old, but anyway, he was a good fighter.
What's some special memories you remember of your father?
Well, I remember coming to, how old was I? 16, 17 or something like that, out on the sand ridge there by the pitting shed. We used to dry fruit and put them through summer houses, apricots and peaches. And later on prunes, we dried them too. But I remember one day he was coming up through the sand ridge there and coming up, and he had a straw hat on, and I looked at him and I said, my dad's a handsome fellow.
Okay. What kind of man was he? Tell me something that illustrates the kind of man he was.
He was quick-tempered. He was in his Irish and English background, especially the Irish. The Irish are always fighting. But he wouldn't take any guff on anybody. And he scared me sometimes because he'd pick up the shotgun, people going through the ranch or the road through there. And boy, he was a fighter. I remember one time, I was a teenager at that time, Christian man, young man, and Uncle Fitch came over, Mitchell Fitch. And he said, well, he said, if Jim hadn't been over and stopped us, he said, I would have cleaned your plow. And my dad was about ready to throw him in the ditch at that time. And I stopped, you don't want to do this. Hey, we were relatives, you know, fight. He's Irish.
What did your father do for a living? How did he earn income?
His first picture we have of him and where I was born up on a section home farm, and really born in Exeter, actually. That's where we lived in, and he was a section farmer. He had the Mexicans and helped them, and had a lot of Mexican people under him at that time. And he learned a little Spanish. He was a hardworking man.
Okay. What, just briefly, tell us your memory of your grandmother. What was your grandmother's name, your grandmother's names, and a little about them?
Well, Sweeney, James Sweeney, he married Bridget Sweeney. That was my grandmother. My grandfather's name was James, but I don't remember him. I was only about a year and a half old, I guess. Neither do I remember Joseph Dougherty. He died with prostate cancer in 1917.
1817? Oh,
1917. And Grandma Dougherty, her name was Clara. She passed away during the flu. I don't know whether 18 or 19, but during the flu. But I remember this. I heard my dad would cry, and he said, "Oh, Jim," he said, "my mother was dying." And she said, "Where's George? Where's George?" And she wanted to see me, he said. And he said, I was afraid because I had you 4 little kids. And I said, well, he said to myself, who would take care of us all? My mother wanted me. He said, Jim, I always felt bad because I didn't get to see her or something she might have wanted to tell me. His mother, I went to the Christian church and evidently was a Christian. And Dad, he gave his heart to the Lord. I think it was, become a Christian. He was about 17 years old in the Christian church.
Okay. You had some special memories and I know you will expand on this at a later time, but you had some special memories about your grandfather, Joe Dougherty, some of the things that he did, Joseph Dougherty.
Joseph Dougherty was a fearless man. He was born in 1840, I believe it was, February 18th, something like that. And then he went to the Civil War, and he was in the Civil War, which started in 1861. And in the Civil War, he had several experiences while he was there. One time while he was out looking for food, the South, they would burn the property, burn the food and different things down so the North would have anything to eat. So they sent Joseph Dougherty, another man, the farmhouse not too far away from where they were camped to get some food. So he and this fellow went up to the barn and they saw 12 horses in there. He looked them all over. He picked out the best one there. And then they went up to the house and they noticed that there was 12 guns leaning against the house. And they were bushwhackers, people who just would come in, took things away from people. They were either for the North and either for the South. And so this lady came out and started handing the guns to the 12 men that were inside the house. And he spoke out very gruffly. He said, "You tell those men in there to watch out what they're doing." And he said, pretty soon he looked behind the house. There they were slipping away, one by one, one by one. And then he saw this big pig. I don't know how big a pig it was, but he got his gun and he shot the pig. And he cut off the hams and handed it to his friend. He said, all right, take it back to camp. I'll sit around and watch a while. And he went on down the road with those hams, and he went back to the barn. He got the best horse he could see there, and he started galloping after the other man that was carrying the hams. He looked back and he saw the horse coming with somebody on it, and he thought it was bushwhackers, and he threw down the hams, hit out in the trees. So come back, picked him up, went on down, and he was in the war there. And one battle, I don't know which one it was. The night before, he had a dream, and in this dream, he saw himself get hurt. I don't know, the cannonball split up or what it was. He got hit in this battle. So he was telling Smitty the time before. He said, the night before again. He says, Smitty, I had a dream last night, and in that dream, I see where I got hit. And you carried me off. Oh, Dougherty, we've been through several battles together. It's not going to happen to you. But it happened just like he saw in his dream. Exactly like that. And after the war was over, that horse that he had gotten, they gave it to him. And so somebody came and stole the horse. Didn't know who it was, but the horse broke loose from someplace and came back. And after a while again, someone stole the horse a second time. So one time there's somebody stealing chickens in his place, and he saw one of them. He shot him with a shotgun, peppered him with a bunch of BBs. And so he was down the stream. He'd take a sled on a horse, a couple of horses, and go down to the river, and then pick up water, then they bring it back to the house. And he laid his gun up against a tree, and he carried his gun where he has one of those rifles, they call them, I forget exactly what they call them right now. Mine didn't work as well. But anyway, he was getting water, and he saw a fellow riding down by a horse with a horse. And he saw the guy have a gun. He saw the guy pick up a gun. He dove behind one of those big old oaken barrels he took water on the sled with. And the guy, I think, hit the barrel. And then he took off, and he had on the guy's gun. And he said about a quarter of a mile away, he said there was an open space there for about a quarter of a mile. He's got his gun, waiting for the guy to come across. Pull the trigger. And boy, then it must come pretty close. Because boy, he said that horse jumped forth and really went then.
Reverting back to your father just for a moment, I forgot to ask you, what size of man was he?
Father was a fellow, in his older age he got heavier, but for the most of his part of his life, he was a fellow about 150, 160. He was, I'd say 5'8.5". I was about a quarter inch or tall when he had, but later on, he got up pretty close to 100. He had a pop belly like his son.
200.
200.
Tell me about your brothers and your brother and your two sisters, their names, and how much older or younger they were than you, and a little bit about each one of them, starting with your oldest.
Winford Norman Dougherty, he was a year and a half older than myself, and we grew up like twins. In fact, I was about tall as he was, and we'd get in a fight. I could beat him in a fight in their early years. Well, you had fist fights too. So one day, I was in the house there, behind the door, locked the door when the door was there, and Winnie's behind the door. Guess what? I tried to get him to let me in. I picked up part of a broken seat off a chair, and in the open door, I let him have it right in the head, made a gash in his head. Boy, nice boys.
What did Winnie do for a living?
Winnie, he went to the service. He sold real estate. Then later he farmed the ranch when Dad was too old.
I understood that in the service that he was undefeated as a boxer, like 28 wins all by knockout. In his final fight, he got knocked out, and that was end of his fighting
Oh, that's
days.
right. That
He
is
was
exactly
a prolific
right.
fighter.
Yeah, he was a good fighter.
When he married, what was his wife's name?
Josephine Sullivan. She was a farmer's daughter. The three girls, Josephine, the oldest name was, what was the other? Francis?
Francis.
Mary. No,
Francis.
Francis, right. Francis, Josephine, and
Kathy.
Kathy, yeah.
And did they have any children?
No children. And he got killed in an automobile accident.
When was that?
Oh, about 6 years ago. 5 years ago.
Okay, and then your next oldest or next sister underneath you, what was her name?
Well, it was Dorothy. Dorothy Ellen Dougherty. And she was a pretty girl, blue-eyed. She was light complected like myself. And she was born November 2nd, I don't know when, but anyway, her next birthday is on November 2nd. She'll be 80 years old.
And now, I didn't ask you about Winnie's size. What kind of size man was he?
Well, Winnie was only 5'6", 5'6.5", and then later in life he was pretty heavy, real heavy. And then he got diabetes, and he had quite a struggle with diabetes, and he worked on the ranch and did real estate, he and his wife.
How big was, what size is your sister Dorothy?
Dorothy was 5'5". She weighed, and a young girl lady there, when she was growing, she weighed about 150.
Okay, and what do you remember anything particularly about Dorothy?
Dorothy was very soft-spoken, and she wasn't as sharp in school as Ella May was. They were in the same grades. Dorothy stayed 3 years in the first grade, but Dorothy was, she was a real quiet-spoken person, real nice to talk to. She'd say, well, how are you, Jim? How's things going, Jim? That's about the way she talked.
And then your youngest sister?
Youngest Ella May. Well, she was quite a character. Ella May and Dougherty both worked in Uncle Dan's store. They stayed at Uncle Dan and Aunt Mary's. My dad's brother, and Mary was my mother's sister, so the kids there were our double cousins. But Ella May went on to college. She became an RN, and she sent her, and she worked 2 years putting her husband, Vernon Snowden, through college, and so she went to college to finish up becoming a doctor. And then another thing about him and her when they're going together, he came up behind her one time when she was clipping her fingernails, and he just touched behind her ribs there. She threw her hands up with the scissors in his hand, and the scissor went right in Vernon's eye, and the eye just rolled right down on her shirt, and she cried for 3 days. She lost 30 pounds.
What was your sister Dorothy, what was her husband's name?
Her husband's name was Melvin Swearingen. He was he made saws. He had sawmills and things he made up, and he had a farm too, and he had been married twice before, but folks didn't like that, but they seemed to have got along pretty good. They had 3 children, Charlie and Richard and Peggy. And Charlie went on to college. He had seen brightest dance or something. It wasn't very good. His health wasn't good for a long time, but he got over that, and he went on to college, graduated college, and worked for the federal government.
How many kids did Dort have? What were their names? I mean, Ella May.
Ella May, she had just 2 children. 3. She had Terry, and she had, the oldest one was Nornell, and the youngest one was, the middle one was born blind, Mary Allen.
Okay, let's pan over now to Mom and ask her a few questions about her life before we move on. Give Dad a little breather here. Mom, tell me a little bit about your mother, what was her name and where did she come from?
My mother was born as Grace S. Root. Her middle name, she was always hated. Her middle name, she is cured, I guess, to feel bad about it now, but her middle name was Sophrona. Grace Sophrona Root.
Where did she come from?
She came from somewhere near Salina, Kansas, in the country, I think she was born. I can't tell you exactly the place, the town, but I think she said it was near Salina.
And where did she meet your father at?
I think she met him either in Reardon or Creston, Washington. And she met him through my uncle, because he was a good friend of my Uncle Elmer, who later became a missionary to India. And he introduced my dad to my mother.
What stories can you remember? What best story do you remember about your mother?
Well, let's see. I remember that she was, as a girl, that we were, although my dad made good wages, they were financially poor from doctor bills. They had no insurance in those days. And they had a hard time making it and keeping up with the bills. And so Mother would sew all my clothes and make everything I wore. And the neighbor lady down the street had older girls. And she'd give Mama some of her old clothes, and Mom could make them into quite nice looking little things for me. And Mother she was always very godly minded, and she would read me Bible stories, and she'd talk to me about the Lord and pray with me. And she brought me up in a very, conscientious way. And as a result of that, I was very conscientious as a girl also.
What was your mother's size? Do you remember kind of how big she was and such?
I remember that at one time, she never was extremely heavy when she was younger, but I remember at one time she got up to 183 pounds. Sad to say, I surpassed her later.
How tall was she?
She was 5'4".
Well, most of her life she was relatively even weight. She wasn't a heavy woman.
Well, no, I don't think at long period of time she was so heavy. She finally went on a diet, which required an awful lot of meat and protein, and she lost a lot of that weight and kept her weight down pretty well.
Well, let's talk about your father for a second. What was his name, and where did he come from?
My father's name was Archie Clinton Johnson.
Clinton, that's too bad. Okay. I'm sorry.
And he came from Bristol, Tennessee.
Oh.
And there's something about that I'd like to tell you. That my uncle and him were born in the same house. My uncle's address was Bristol, Virginia, and my dad's address was Bristol, Tennessee. Different rooms in the house. They were born on a borderline.
How did he earn a living?
He earned a living as when he was younger, he worked in a flour mill. And then after he moved that's when he was in Reardon, Washington, and he moved to Portland, Oregon then, and he got a job with the State Industrial Accident Commission as an auditor. And all the years that as I was growing up, and until he retired, he worked for the State Industrial Accident Commission of Oregon.
So, of course, Jim, your husband was raised in Farmersville, California on a ranch. Where were you raised?
I was raised in the city of Portland, and I felt like I had it real nice because I felt we lived in quite a livable house, and then just a couple, 3 blocks from the school. And when I was a little kid and only had to walk, just a little ways to school, really kind of a spoiled situation.
Can you share a special memory about your father?
My dad was a very loving father and a very family-oriented. He didn't have a whole lot of time to spend with us because his job required that while we were growing up that he come home from his work about 5, and he had to make out all his reports, and he wouldn't get through till 9:30 or 10 at night with these reports. And later on, as the years went by, they changed that so that his reports would be done during his working hours so he could spend more time. But by that time, I was about grown. But even when he was working real hard, he'd always come in and tell my sis and I a bedtime story before when we were going to bed, and he'd make them up, and we got real interesting ones about cougars out in the forest trying to catch little kids or something. And little boys trying flying off a roof with make-believe wings and hurting themselves. It was interesting. We really enjoyed his stories, even if they were a little gruesome at times.
What was your grandfather's names, and just a real brief about your grandfather, so you remember?
My grandfather, I don't remember my dad's father. His name, I think, was Richard, I believe it was. Richard Johnson, I believe. Now, I don't remember, like I say, anything about him much, but I do remember this, that he must have done a lot of drinking, because my grandma was really, after he was gone, she could never forget how she held his drinking against him. I can never remember.
How about your other grandfather? You remember him?
And my grandpa, yes, I remember Grandpa Root. Now, he had a beard and kind of, he looked, had beard and stuff kind of like Lincoln, only of course he looked different. He was shorter and had lighter hair, and kind of reddish brown hair, as I remember. And he was, I know what Mother said about him. He was a circuit riding preacher, and when she was growing up, and he would, and also farmed. He farmed, and then he'd ride his horses to one church and then another to hold services. And a very godly man, and they had worship in their home every day, and it's through the worship in their home that my mother experienced knowing the Lord.
Now, reverting back to your father again, I forgot to ask you about his size and appearance.
My dad was, I don't think he got much over 165 pounds or 70, something like that. And he was only about 5'8" And as all the years I knew him, he was bald-headed with a little fringe around the side. And he kept a few locks he put over the top.
What, now about your grandmothers, do you remember anything about your grandmothers?
Yes, I remember both my grandmothers. My grandmother, Johnson, she and I were real close. And on Sundays, many times we'd stay at church. I'd stay with her, and my aunt, her sister, Aunt Sally, we'd stay there, and I liked to stay there. One main reason I liked to stay there, because Aunt Sally'd always buy us each a pint of ice cream to eat, and I wanted the ice cream. But then I would get up in the pulpit and preach to them in the afternoon. And then once in a while, Grandma Johnson and I would walk home from there, and it must have been 2 miles at least, or 3. But we would walk home from church occasionally. And Grandma, I would go up, she stayed at our house in the early years, and I'd go up and sleep with her once in a while, because she was always kind and talked to me a lot. And I'd hear the rain coming down on the roof upstairs, and I enjoyed that. And Grandma and I had good times together.
Okay, what about did you have any brothers or sisters?
And I have a sister, Helen, and I would have had a brother had he lived, but he was born before I was born, and he was stillborn, so I didn't get to none of us got to experience life with him. But then my sister Helen is 3 years and 9 months older than I am, and she's still living, and we both experience about the same physical difficulties as Mom. All three of us seem to inherit the same, like arthritis
And what was her husband's name?
her husband's name was Delwyn Woodrow Wilson.
Okay.
Oh no, Dallas Woodrow. Dallas Woodrow Wilson.
Okay.
But he goes by Woodrow.
Goes by Woody.
I'd like to just talk to you about your life a little bit. First off, where was you born and when?
I was born in at the Manual Hospital in Portland, January the 6th, 1924.
And what did your parents name you?
They named me Doris Elizabeth Johnson.
Was that after something, or why did they name you that, you know?
I don't know. I know the name Doris is supposed to have a meaning something like the gift of God or something like that, but I don't know if that's the reason they named me that or not.
And did you live in Portland when you were born?
Yes.
And and I guess you would call Portland, at least I'm familiar with Portland, as a metropolitan city.
Yes, and I was born on 23rd Street in Portland, and only lived, that's where my folks lived when I was born, and I only lived there 2 years, and they built a new home on 32nd Place near Killingsworth in Portland, and I lived there the rest of my unmarried life.
Describe your home and your home and your neighborhood.
Well, I thought we had a real nice home. It had had hardwood floors and a piped furnace with registers into every room, fireplace, and it was quite modern. And it was the upstairs was made unfinished, fixed so that they could add an apartment to it later if they wanted to, with piping for bathroom and kitchen and so forth. And later on in life, then they did finish it. But I used to go upstairs into this unfinished kitchen area and made myself a worship center. And when I come home from school, I go up there to pray and to read the Bible, and have a little worship. And I liked my worship center.
Did you have a neighbor? What kind of neighborhood did you have? Did you have friends you played with in the neighborhood, or?
Yes, I had a girl by the name of Ruth Swenson that lived across the street from me, and we played together real well until they moved away when she was probably about 8 or 9, and I was about that age.
Overall, was your childhood a happy one, or difficult, or full of adventures, or what?
I think I had a pretty happy life, except the times when I get these terrible sinus headaches. And I remember the neighbor had a party, and I wanted to go to this party so bad that I had a splitting headache from sinus. And but I went to the party, and in the basement, on the floor down there, where they had a kind of a skating party down there where you could skate, and I laid on an old Springs mattress they had on the floor there, and watched the other guys play because I was in so much pain from that sinus.
What was your favorite childhood games or activities?
Oh, let's see, hide and go. Neighbors used to like to play hide and go seek up and down the block, and I used to like to get out into the street with a piece of chalk and draw me a house with rooms in it to play house. And I liked my doll. I was very feminine that way. I liked the doll. One thing different, my sister and I loved to play with dolls, but my sister didn't want to play with a doll unless it was a live baby. It had to be alive for her.
What school did you go to first? Or
I went to Kennedy Grade School, and I just got a call from my sister saying that she and I forgot who else were going to go back to Kennedy School right away to a restaurant that's been made in that building now. They have a restaurant in that building, and they have sleeping rooms in that building for for breakfast and bed, and they've made it into quite a institution. Now I'm anxious to go back and see it myself.
Did you like school?
Yes, I like school.
How did you do in school?
I was just an average student. I was never a straight A student. In fact, I wasn't an A student. Oh, they graded us E, F, G, and no E, G, something else, and F. And I got E's a lot of times.
Well,
I
it's
got a lot of E's, but I never in high school and all. I wasn't a straight A student.
it's widely known in our family circle that you've been a good poet and writer over the years. Did that start when you was in as a teenager or when?
Oh, I think that started after I became a pastor's wife, and then we didn't have. We needed certain literature in order to teach in the church or to put on programs and plays, and I felt the necessity of getting material, and I couldn't find what I wanted, so I started writing to get what I wanted.
What high school did you go to?
I went to Jefferson High School, and Jefferson High School was a good high school at that time. But later on in life, when my nieces went to that school, one of them had to quit a month before she was to graduate because it became so dangerous that she was afraid her car would get bashed in, and she was afraid she might be attacked in a hall. It became so bad that they had even attacked kids, I guess, in the hall, and they had to have guards, and it became so bad that she couldn't go, but it was fine when I went.
Did your school have other races in it, or was it predominantly white?
All I can remember was one black boy in our high school at that time, and he was a real neat boy, and everybody in the school liked this boy, and there was no prejudice or anything felt at that time.
Because I know today Jefferson High School has had a lot of problems with interracial,
Right.
because it's very racial, mixed race, and they've had a lot of struggles with that over the years.
Well, there became so much animosity between the two, the whites and the blacks. Since that time, I don't know what promoted
You
that.
gotta check.
How was your class? How big was your class? Excuse me.
My class?
Yeah, how
Oh
big?
goodness, I have no idea.
Was it a large class?
Oh, you see, we were put in different homerooms, and there was freshmen put in all different homerooms, so I don't know how many altogether. Probably over 300 or more.
Wow. And what were you like in high school?
What was I like? I was kind of self-conscious. And for one thing, I'll tell you, my mother didn't believe in girls wearing anklets at first. She came from an old background of being real strict about dress, and she didn't want me to wear anklets. And I was one that believed in obeying my mother whether it was right or not. And I wore the long stockings to school, and I don't think another girl's legs were looked at as much in that school as mine were. They'd come up and say to me, "What are you doing with those long stockings on this time of year?"
Your social life, what was it around school or church or sports or other activities? What did you do
It was
socially
around
in high
church
school?
more. I was more church oriented. I never went to a whole lot of the school functions.
Did you have a lot of people, of course, you didn't watch a lot of movies, I understand, growing up and this kind of thing. And did you have any favorite stars or anybody that you looked up to?
No, I don't think so amongst the stars. I wasn't very Hollywood oriented.
Can you remember something crazy or fun that you did as a teenager?
Crazy or fun? Oh, goodness. I'd have to think a while on that. I probably did a lot of crazy things.
Well, we'll
I
move
don't
on.
remember now.
We'll move on past that then. Do you remember your first date and who was it with?
My first date, let's see, I think to call it a date, I think would have been with Arthur Smith.
And where did you go?
And we went to try to play tennis. I say try because I didn't know how to play tennis. But we went with Corolla and her boyfriend at that time.
What was the fashion rage at that time?
bob socks, which I was much more comfortable in later years when I started wearing them. And I don't know, I think saddle Oxfords and dirty corduroys.
Did you happen to go to college?
Yes, I went 2 years to Warner Pacific College, which was then Pacific Bible College
In Portland?
in Portland,
Okay, what was your major in?
in ministerial education. I felt called to ministry. Then later on in life, when I was in 1967, I think it was, I went to Northwest Nazarene College for a year.
How did you celebrate Christmas, or what do you remember about Christmas?
Oh, I loved Christmas. We'd go out and find a Christmas tree and come home and decorate it. We never got our trees until near Christmas. A lot of people got them early, but we waited till near Christmas. Then we'd bring home the tree and we'd put it up and we'd decorate it together, and we'd hang stockings over the fireplace. And one of my favorite Christmas presents actually was the stocking I'd get at Christmas, I think, because I remember them better. I remember my dad had very unique ideas of getting me stuff, and got me a little pocket knife one time, and he got me a little tiny purse, and those things I remember, and I don't remember the bigger things. But one time he bought me some what they call black tulip perfume, I think it was. And I put some on. It was the smellingest stuff I ever smelled. I went to school, and I think they made me go wash it off or go home or something. I can't remember, but it about stunk them all out.
What do you remember about your Thanksgivings? Who came to your Thanksgivings?
Now my uncle and aunt and cousins from Uncle Cleve Johnson and his wife and their children. And then we went to their house alternately a lot of times.
Who usually did the cooking?
At our place, Mom did, and at their place, she did.
Okay.
I think probably we took things. I can't remember those details.
Did you remember anything about Halloween or Easter growing up?
Yes, I went trick-or-treating. I remember that as a child. And it's a wonder, I don't remember anybody particularly going with us, just going kids together. And we went to one house, and they asked us in, and they brought out the most beautiful looking cake you ever saw. And I just had the awfulest time to eat that cake, because they had spilled a rum bottle evidently into it, and it was rum flavored, and it just tasted terrible. And I had a hard time to gag that down.
What was your first job?
My first job was probably working at J.C. Penney's I think J.C. Penney's probably. At the age of 19, I think, going to college. And I had quite a time then, because I had to get on the bus at our house, or the streetcar rather, and go downtown to J.C. Penney's, and then I take it back. No, I did that, yeah. No, when I was going to school, I'd get up at 6 or 6:30 in the morning to get on the bus, and then I'd have to transfer again, and in order to get to Warner Pacific Bible College on time. Then I'd take the bus to J.C. Penney's and work in the afternoons, and that was it, I guess. And then then I worked at Newberry's, and also just a few days I worked for one of the 10-cent stores. I think it was Woolworths for a short time, but I couldn't stand that because they had me on a aisle with 5 other girls, and there was nothing for us to do. We get it all set up, and there's not enough people to serve, and it became so unbearable to stand there all day waiting for customers and everything, and about drove me nuts, so I quit.
Well, let's move over to Dad and talk to him about his growing up before we talk to both of them about later life. Dad, where was you born?
I was born in Lemon Cove, California.
And when? July 5th?
July 5th, 1916, yeah.
And what did your parents name you?
James W.M. Dougherty.
What's the WM supposed to stand for?
William.
And was there a certain reason they named you James?
I suppose after Grandpa James Sweeney.
Okay, and at the time, where did you live?
We lived up at Lemon Cove.
On a farm or?
No, Dad was a foreman on a section railroad.
Well, what was your hometown like? Wasn't a big metropolitan town.
Oh, maybe 3 or 4 stores all.
Oh, very small town?
Very small.
And describe your home and neighborhood.
Well, it was just alongside the railroad track there, and house was brick, and they had a big old windmill about 60 feet high, and they pumped water. The wind turned the windmill, the windmill pumped water up the thing. And there was orange trees around there, and maybe some lemons.
Okay. Overall, was your childhood happy, difficult, full of adventure? What would you say about your childhood?
I'd say my childhood was a very, very adventurous childhood. My brother and I, we'd go fishing to get a white string and get a hook, and we'd go fishing and catch little minnows out of the river, and we'd eat blackberries, and we'd eat things, figs, and get the fig trees, and then we'd come home and get a spanking, and a few days later we'd go again.
Were you full of mischief as a child?
Evidently I was, because I got my neighbor's house. He had an old BB gun there, and I had some shingle nails. I went and got his BB gun, put some shingle nails in his gun, shot it out, then took it back and put it in his house. His old bachelor.
Describe your favorite childhood games or activities. And who did you play with?
Oh, I played with, we played hide and seek, we played black man, we played,
Black Man?
yeah, we played ditch 'em, and one guy was it, and he gets this guy, and until they're all caught, then the first guy you catch, he's it for next game. And
Did you happen to like sports?
well, I played a little softball. They had an indoor ball. When I was in grade school, but I wasn't a good baseball player, softball player. Well, it was indoor, what they call it then. And what else did I do? Oh, we played pum pull away. Don't come, we'll pull away. We played red line. You get across the line, and someone grabs you and touches you. You have to go in the moist spot, and somebody runs down, try to get you to touch before they get that. They have to go back. They have to go in the moist spot.
Okay.
Running games.
Where did you start school at?
I started school in Farmersville, and I went. Mrs. Blinko was my first teacher, and I had to take that class over again. I stayed 2 years in the first grade.
Okay.
Then another thing, a grade later, 3rd grade I think it was, I used to like to catch skunks. I used to like to set traps for skunks and things like that, and got a skunk in the trap, and I had some shoes. We didn't have any shoes in those days, but barefoot, because I was about 15 years old. So, but I got that skunk smell all over my shoes, and I went to school, and they made me go home. I'll stick the school out with a skunk.
Were you did you have any chores growing up that you had to do?
Well, we had to get the wood in, and we had to go out and pick up the eggs around the barns and the haystacks where we would find the chickens, find the eggs, find the nest, and then we got some cows, and we had to milk cows. So sister milked 4, I milked 4, my brother milked 4, mother and dad milked 6. Rain or shine, sleet or snow, we had to be out there and milk those cows. We had about, I don't know, 40, 50 of them or so.
Well, let's talk about your teenage years for a few minutes. Where did you go to high school?
I went to Lycia High School.
And how big a class were you in?
Oh, about 185, 190,
And when did you graduate?
1935.
What were you like in high school?
Well, I played football 4 years in high school. I was sort of a quiet fella. I wasn't the best student in the world, but the last year of high school, I got on the honor roll. I got A's in biology and some A's, and done real well. And I was quite a efficient football player too. Got my nose broke. Well, I remember playing one game Port in Hanford, and I went through the line and got this guy by the foot. He slipped off and hit me in the nose, broke my nose, blood spurted out. Next guy about killed me. Bad.
And you also played baseball. In fact, didn't you hit 5 home runs one year?
Oh, I hit. I wasn't a good baseball player because I was afraid of that baseball. But I wasn't afraid of the softball. They throw that ball. They throw that ball today 80 miles an hour. I didn't know they throw softball that hard, but I played softball when I was in junior college and for Idaho team, or a Ivanhoe team.
What was your chief interest in school? I mean, was it sports or?
I think my chief interest was sports, yeah.
What was your social life? Did it revolve around school or church or sports or?
Well, my social life, I started going with a girl named Josephine, and when I was a junior, I guess it was, or sophomore, junior, and we went together for 2 years. She was a lovely girl, and she played the piano, and I practiced singing. We sang together, and went horseback riding, roller skating, went to shows, and stopped and get a hamburger for 15 cents and something to drink for about the same, you know. Had a good social life.
What was the fashion like your statement at that time?
Cordio, they wear a corduroy. Corduroy overall as going to high school. And then later when they went into blue jeans, into Levi's.
What was your biggest disagreement with your parents ever growing up? Did you ever have a disagreement? What was your biggest disagreement?
No, I don't think I had much disagreement with them. When they told me to do something, I did it. Because I knew if I didn't, then I'd get killed. I wouldn't get killed, but Dad had a big old razor strap back of the door there, and we got in trouble. Then he grabbed this old razor strap and walked us around the room with it. We went around and around.
Your mom's claim to fame was being a writer. Your claim to fame, growing up talking to your family, was your swimming. They say you were one of the best swimmers around. When and how did you develop that?
Well, we about lived in the water. We played tag in the water. The water was dingy color. And so the thing was, if you're it, and then you hear the other guys, and you swim, just find out where they were, then you touch them when they touch the neighbor it. Then the water's kind of dingy, you know, it wasn't clear water. And so we played tag hours after hours, and I used to swim up streams, currents real strong, and I could swim up the streams. Even when I was in college, I could swim real fast.
Your brother would tell me that when you go to the swimming pool, that people, and girls especially, just flock to watch you swim.
That's my wife, after we was married, because I swim out the streams all the time. And wife, she'd go to the swimming pool, she said the kids, I'd swim back and forth.
You had a
underwater.
fan club.
Yeah, I could dive real well, you know. Girls look at me, and I took a Charles Atlas course when I was 16 years old, put inch around my neck, and inch around my arms, 3 inches around my chest. I was old Charlie Atlas.
And a thin waist.
Thin waist.
Well, how did your family celebrate the holidays, like Christmas?
We had a great time on Christmas and the holidays. We never got many presents, maybe one or two, but Uncle Dan, we would either go to Uncle Dan's place. They had a bigger house, and this kid was sitting in the kitchen. He's sitting on boxes and this and that, and they'd have turkey and chicken and dressing and all that went with us. And those kids would get out. It's warmer in California, and we had to play football. We had a wonderful time playing football. The boys and the girls all play football, and then we rode horseback. We get the horses, get several horses, and we go around and ride the horses and do things like that. We had a great time.
After high school, did you attend college?
I went to junior college following high school. I did pretty well the first year, but I had no desire. I didn't know what in the world I was going to do. So, and then I had broken up with Josephine, I went with her for 2 years. My brother went with her for a year. Well, that happened, and so her folks owned this 200-acre place, prunes, and the Uncle John used to say, Winnie went with Josephine a year before I did, and then I went with her, and he said, oh, yeah, old Jim, he's going with Josephine now. We'll get that 200 acres. But we had much property. We didn't have 200. We had 200 at one time, I guess. The ranch was, but I stopped going with Josephine, and the reason I stopped was this. I gave my heart to the Lord first when I was about 15 years old, and I back and forth, you know, like kids do. I got in problems so far. I used to go out and steal pigeons. My brother, Johnny Enos, Portuguese boy, and we stole watermelons, and we stole this and that, and we little old thieves, I guess. But anyway, after, I don't know, junior year or something, senior year, one Christmas there, I heard the preacher talk about restitutions. You stole things in high school. You stole things you should make right, you know. I felt condemned on Christmas Eve, and I had about, $4.20. I went back to this place we stole some pigeons from. But those pigeons flew back to the guy's house, because it was only about 2-3 miles away, you know, but I paid him $4.20. But I went to the other guy's house first. We stole the big old white kings, old Johnny and I. And I kept them. They'd fly around. We had pigeons in the barn. We had about 110 pigeons before dove season started. Well, when dove season started, then the pigeons began to disappear. One of the white kings got killed, I guess. The hunters out in the field shooting dove and pigeons that feed together out there different places. We thinned them down to about 75, or they dead. So this Christmas Eve, I wanted to go back and make restitutions, because I felt this was what the Lord had me do. So I went to this one guy's house, and I told him, I said, I want to pay for some pigeons. Neighbor boy and I had stolen from him. Oh, no, he said, son, that's all right. It's okay, but that was 10 years later, you know. So I paid, oh no, I said, I want to pay you. So I paid him $1.50 a piece of those pigeons. What they were. Then I went to this other guy's house, knocked on the door, and I asked him, I said, well, I stole some pigeons from you a few years back, and I'd like to pay for you for them. He said, come on in, talk to you. Oh, boy, he's going to call the cops. That's what I thought. Oh, man, he's going to call the cops. So I went on in, and I talked to him. He said, yeah, I remember we was losing pigeons back there. But he said, you know what? He said, I thought it was the Murphy boys. And I knew the Murphys, too. And I said, you just got the wrong Doughertys, the wrong name, wrong Irishmen. I was one, but I paid restitution. I went to high school. I had swiped a sweatshirt from I was playing football, you know, and I went back to the principal's office today. I swiped a sweatshirt from him, and I wanted to make restitution.
So you went to junior college at the College of Sequoias. Did you play football for them at junior college?
Oh, yeah, I played football in first year, but I quit after that because my zoology teacher says, what's football? What's it amount to? Rah, pretty soon it's all over with.
Did you get to play much?
Oh, yeah.
Did you start?
Oh, yeah. The freshman year, high school, I didn't start much.
But after that, you were known pretty much.
I was known as Powerhouse Dougherty.
You're pretty powerful.
Powerful. I was powerful.
After junior college, you went away to college somewhere else?
Nope. I went to junior college, the last year in junior college. I flunked both in English 3 times, and I flunked anatomy. I didn't know what I was going to do. I had the clue what God wanted me to do. And that was the thing. I didn't know what God wanted me to do. And the reason I quit going to Josephine, I played football with Harold Hammer, the guy she married, you know.
No, we didn't know that.
And so it came to me like this. Well, Jim, suppose you and Josephine get married. And after you're married a while, she'd say to you, "Well, Jim, you never did have anything till you married me." And that didn't set very good with me. We had as much as they had, as far as money goes, and so forth. Her folks were older people, and because of that, I didn't go with her anymore. But one day I was over at the store a few months later, or I don't know how much later it was, and she was there with my sisters. That's how we got acquainted in the first place. If it wasn't for her, I wouldn't be in the church today in the Lit Elm. They're the one that's got us going to church.
What was your very first job?
First job, picking prunes.
Did you do a lot of farm work over the years?
Oh, but lots of farm work.
So most of your jobs were in that kind of area as a teenager?
Well,
Yeah,
I
man.
worked on the farm, 15 years old, went out, worked on a peach picking crew, picked some other stuff too.
Okay. Thank you very much. Discuss a little bit about your courtship and your marriage between Mom and Dad here. And Dad, we'll ask you first, when did you first decide to ask Mom out?
She went to college, and I saw her when she first came to the depot with another boy that came in there, Sheldon Conrad, and but there's some party that was going to, and she asked me to the party. That's how we got going together.
What was your favorite memory about your courtship? No memory, huh? Pretty poor courtship.
No. We we were going together. We went together for about 2 years there, a year and a half, and something like that, 2 years. And we were standing out on 68th Street there by the college division, and she says to me one morning, they were waiting for the bus. She said, "Just because I'm going with you now, don't think I'm going with you forever." And boy, I thought I see myself turning around, and I said, "Who does she think she is? Man, there's 5 girls to every boy in this college. Man, who does she think she is?" Then a better thought came to me. If you're a wonder boy, you better fight for it. And I did. We got it.
How long did your courtship last?
Till we got married. Got married, 43.
How long did you date? 2 years? Okay, thank you, Mom. Mom is giving us hand signals over here. And how did you propose to her?
How do I propose? Oh, that was interesting too. I sneaked up and kissed her a time or two, and she said, "You didn't ask for that." And she and I had argued about this all our life, for a long time, you know. Because when I came up there, I was going with the girl Gladys, a preacher's daughter, for a little bit. What I mean, I went with her once, I guess, or twice, 3 times. And so I was sitting there and put my arm up back to the sofa, but I promised myself not to kiss any more girls till I found the one I wanted to marry. And she and I had arguments about this. And I said, this was my idea. And so here I was, this girl was there, brother's outside, and I put my arm back her, looking at those big, brown, beautiful eyes of Gladys, you know. And I said, no, don't kiss her. No. So I didn't kiss her. That's pretty good.
That's real good.
Pretty good taste.
Real good. Okay, Mom, let's go over to Mom here, Jean, and just get her view since she seems to have a different idea about things. but Mom, when do you remember seeing Dad for the first time, and what did you think? And
He came in on the bus as I went with Pluma Conrad to meet her brother, and I think she sort of had ideas that maybe I'd go with him. Thank the Lord I didn't. But anyway, Jim was with him, and I looked at him, and he had this Letterman sweater on, and you know the girls used to idolize the boys with Letterman sweaters, and I thought to myself at that time, well, I wouldn't stand a chance with him anyway because I'm not athletic. And that's the first time I saw him. And then I would see him at church, and one of the girls that lived at our home, boarded at our house, that was going to college, I was still in high school, asked me to go to a school party with her, and I did, and that's where I got better acquainted with him, I think, seeing him at this party. And then when our courtship started, we courted by going on the Portland Transportation bus line. He didn't have a car, so we just go where we were going on a bus. Wasn't that romantic?
Yes.
And anyway, he yeah, I never initiated him coming. And what happened? I got appendicitis, and he was kind of interested in me. And he somehow or another, Mother knew that we'd talked a lot together, and she called him and told him I was in the hospital. So he came to the hospital to see me. And all of the girls in the ward there would say when he left, well, why didn't he kiss you? Is he scared to kiss you? I says, he didn't kiss me.
Were you still wearing those stockings at that time?
Oh, I always wore them, I suppose, then. But anyway, I said, he hasn't kissed me. And they wouldn't believe it, because he acted real nice and sweet, you know.
When did he first kiss you?
And so after I got home from the hospital and was recovering, one day he bent over, I was lying on the bed there, and he bent over and kissed me. I said, you didn't ask for that. And he just turned red and I don't know what he said then. But then later on, he came over, and we were sitting on the davenport, and folks weren't in the room or anything, and he, no, I don't know how it was. But anyway, he tried to kiss me again, and I said, Jim, years ago, I made up my mind that I would never...
This you got for me.
I would never let a boy kiss me unless, first of all, I knew I was going to marry him, unless I was going to marry him. And I didn't get it from him because he never said a thing to me about it at that time. But anyway...
I disagree.
Oh,
You got it from me.
your memory's failed you, Dad.
Go ahead.
And anyway, and then he, later on, then he came over, and we were sitting on the davenport, and he said to me, he said, Doris, he said, you know, a long time ago, I decided the same thing. He said, I decided that I wouldn't kiss another girl until I knew it was the one I wanted to marry. He said, will you kiss me?
How about that?
That's how we became engaged.
Okay, when were you married?
We were married on May the 21st, 1943.
At what church?
At the what was in the Wasco Street Church.
Who was the pastor who married you?
And it was Brother Wick Donahue.
Did you have anything special at your wedding that might be unique?
Yes, we had a very special wedding. Sister Grace Donahue had went to all the trouble to call all of the different good singers from all the Church of Gods in Portland together and train them to sing the wedding march. And then made a contact with the Cascade College to borrow robes. We at that time didn't have robes from them. And they sang the wedding march as it goes, faithful and true, we lead ye forth. And they had these robes on, and they marched up the aisle in front of us and led us and formed wings on either side and sang, continued singing till we got up there. And then and then my cousin, I think, sang also at dawning or something like that at the wedding. And then at the end of the ceremony, and we marched down, and after we marched down, the choir came together and sang the hymn, Keep Me in Touch with Thee, My Blessed Lord, at the end.
Where did you go on your honeymoon?
We went to Nell Scott Beach. Only we didn't go to about 2 days afterwards because his folks had come. But on the wedding day, he started to get sick. Started to develop a big boil in his nose, very bad one.
Very attractive?
Oh.
And it got pretty red. And it was on the inside of his nose, not the outside. And we went to Nell Scott Beach, and while we were up there, or the first night we were up there, he got a burning hot fever and out of his head and started talking out of his head. Scared me to death because I knew anything in the nose was close to the brain and it could kill him. And I started calling out loud to the Lord. I said, Lord, please spare him, please touch him. And you know, his fever instantly left him. The Lord healed him right on the spot.
And so you had a good rest of your honeymoon?
Well, the next day we decided we better get back so they could wash it out and clean it out. And so we went back. We went back to Portland then. But that would have been tremendous if it had been.
What was your and Dad's first job together?
First job together.
Yeah, as a married couple.
As a married couple was taking the pastorate at the Newburgh Church of God.
In Newburgh, Oregon?
Yes. And it didn't amount to much of a work then, just a few people.
Okay.
And it was held in an old house.
And then your first child was born?
He was born a year later. No, 10 months and 5 days after we were married, he was born.
Was he born in, where was he born at?
He was born in the Emmanuel Hospital, the same place where I was born. He was born in my old hospital, where I was born. And he was 6 weeks old when we took the church in Newburgh.
How much was, and what was his name, and how much did he weigh at birth?
David Michael Dougherty weighed 8 pounds and 4 ounces, I believe.
Okay. Do you remember anything about David as a child?
Yes, I remember he was always a gifted boy, and happy, and he started singing at a very young age, and they let him sing in church. He sang in church one time. Mother got him to sing in church one time, and the preacher was so disgusted that we had David sing. They said we were trying to show off our son or something. And in his prayer, he made a statement that really made my mother disgusted because of her got him to sing. And she was really upset with that preacher for what he said in his prayer.
When was your second child born, and where?
And Douglas.
Was you still in the same pastorate at that time? When
Douglas
was born?
O'Neill Dougherty was born. Well, we were still pastoring in Newburgh. And his name, O'Neill, we had a little lady in our church named Sister O'Neill. And we got to thinking, boy, that name goes good with Douglas. Douglas O'Neill, let's just put name him after her last name. So we did, and Doug's always liked that.
We got the name Douglas from a little cousin that I took home on a horseback, and he cried all the way home, the old mile and a half I took him home, and they took him to town. He had appendicitis and he died at 4 years old.
Okay, was you still
Douglas.
Was you still in Newburgh then when Doug was born? Or had you?
Yes.
Okay, what hospital was he born at?
Same one that David was and I was. Emmanuel.
And how much did he weigh?
And he weighed 7 pounds 5 ounces. He was my littlest one.
Okay, and then from Newburgh, Oregon, you moved to where?
Newburgh, let's see, we went to Willowbrook, California, didn't we?
Well, didn't we stay there in town? I went to school.
We took a
I
year
went
off, I
back to
think,
school
and he
for a
went
year.
back to school for a year.
At Warner.
And we bought a house through my dad. My dad put up the money. And we got a house that was down near Fred Meyer's in Portland, and near Killingsworth and Union Avenue, and they were going to put in big buildings there, so they sold these houses to be moved. And my dad saw this, and my dad's quite a fellow to look for things that would be a good bargain. And we bought this house, and then we bought a lot down on 17th, and had the basement dug out and a partial basement put in, or at least a basement, and had the house moved on to it, and had it finished, and I loved that house.
Okay.
I worked at Albertsons.
Now it's been sold, it's in the colored neighborhood, and now it's sold to black people.
We call that Afro-American neighborhood nowadays.
Yep.
Yeah, it was a good neighborhood.
Well, then where was your third son born, and what was his name, and in the time and date and such?
Daniel Patrick Dougherty was born on December the 25th, 1949 at Linwood, Washington. California. Linwood, California. We were pastors at Willowbrook, California at that time, and he was born at Linwood, and he was that Sunday morning we were having church service, and we worshipped. They had built us kind of apartment in that church, and we had to have Sunday school classes in all the rooms, even our bedroom and all the rooms, in order to have enough room for everybody. And I started going into labor during Sunday school hour, so I went and laid across the back of the bed that the little kids were having Sunday school class on. And then between Sunday school and church, he turned the service over to a layman and took me to the hospital. And he wasn't born, though, till 8:40 that night.
And how much, so he's born on Christmas Day then?
Yeah.
Yes.
And how much did he weigh?
He weighed 8 pounds, 13 ounces, something like that.
Okay. Now, when was the prince born, the fourth son?
Yeah, when was Tom born? Thomas? Thomas was born on June the 2nd, 1955 at, what's the name of that hospital?
St. Anthony's.
St. Anthony's Hospital in Pendleton. And
He's an Oregon.
And he was the little one of the family?
and he weighed 9 pounds and 2 ounces, and you can tell that he was the biggest by today he is.
Okay, just let's talk.
A big good one, though.
Let's talk to Father over here, Father Jim. Jim, I want you just to tell a story about each of your children, starting with the oldest, something you remember about them. And Mom, I'll give you the same opportunity if you can think of a story, but something dealing with Dave, the oldest. What comes to mind when you think of the oldest, Dave?
I think he'd be singing, beautiful singing, singing like an angel. But I remember he was sick when he was about 7 years old one day, and we always prayed in the house when people were sick. Always had prayer with them, most always anyway. And so I was. Well, I said, David said, you know, Dad, I prayed, and the Lord healed me. He said, I'm healed. And so I said, well, David, how many times you have to pray? Oh, about 7.
What about Doug? Do you have a memory of Doug? Well, no, let's pan over to Mom and get another memory of Dave. We'll keep this in the same brother. What do you think? Do you have a memory of Dave?
Yes, while we were in Clarkston, Washington, one of the ladies of the church wanted to put him into Starlit Stairway in Spokane in a contest for singing. And so she made an appointment with him and got him in there. And I went with him, and I took him, drove him to Spokane, and we went to this studio, and he took first place, I guess, in that contest, and was a semifinalist. You know, they had different contests, and he was to go back for the finals. And when the time came to go to the finals, he got sick, or I did one, and he did, I think, and we couldn't go. No, that wasn't the way it was it? I can't remember. But anyway, we couldn't go to it. And we had to cancel out, and I always felt like that was God's will. Because if he had gone and become quite outstanding and even won, he might have wanted to gone to Hollywood, or he might have been tempted to go into the secular world, and he would never become the pastor he is today. And I always felt it was God's will that we weren't able to make it.
I understand that Dave was quite an athlete, and he played different sports. Dad, what did he participate in?
He was a great basketball player. He had a harem after him, about 13, 14 girls come to root for him. And he would shoot those long shots out there. And he was a great basketball player, and great in track too. And he ran the half mile and he outrunning a lot of people. He was a great athlete, David. He played football a little bit. He got his ribs broke when the ninth grader cracked or something. That settled the football.
So well, let's talk about Doug for a second. What's a memory you have of Doug?
Doug, he and David looked so cute together and was growing up together, you know, and and Doug was a real student. He great mathematician when he finished from high school, and they gave him some kind of a test in math and algebra and this and that, and they had some kind of a thing right at the bottom of the page, a problem, and he worked it out and found it. Not very many people ever figured it out. He figured it out, and he was a good student. Good student in high school, good student in college.
And he was also an athlete?
Oh, athlete. He was a pitcher. I'd catch him out there. We'd throw 40 balls, and boy, here's this one, here's this one, here's that one. And he become a real good pitcher. And if he hadn't go to California every year, I think, and played on the American Legion team and so forth. So he played American Legion something. He was a great left-hand pitcher.
He would have had a chance to possibly play pro ball if
Right.
if
He stayed with Church over there.
But he also played pretty
Church.
solid basketball too. And
Oh yeah, he was a champion foul shooter in Oregon, and we practiced Hawthorne School there in Pendleton, yeah, and he had the best number out of 15,000 boys of foul shooting going into the state tournament.
Well, Mom, what's some special memories? What's some special memories you remember about Doug?
I remember Doug when we were living in Willowbrook, and he was just a little fellow, about 3 or so. And Dave and the little neighbor boy next door coerced him into calling our neighbor on one side, who was black, a nigger, which was terrible, the N word. I don't like to say that word. And anyway, the mother came storming over at the house. The fellow he called that was a grown fellow, but the mother was an old, kind of an old lady. She came storming over the house to tell us what he had done. And I was upset over that, because I always tried to have my kids make sure they didn't call kids like names and stuff, And so I spanked Doug, for doing it. But it should have been David that I spanked, because David put him up to it. And I remember Doug, I think, had a no-hit, no-run pitch.
No, he never did. David got the no-hit game.
Was it David?
Yeah. Dougie never made a no-hitter.
Oh, I always thought it was the other way around.
But Doug was known for his pitching. And
he was known for his pitching, because he was a great pitcher. And so was David, for that matter. They both were. They were both equally about as good. So. And,
no, Doug was a better pitcher.
In fact, all our boys have been real athletic. They've all been great basketball players.
Yeah.
Okay, what about, let's ask Mom about Dan, special memories about Dan growing up?
Yeah, the memory that comes to me probably the most, in a way, is the one about when he got polio. And he came in one evening, he got sick and had the flu, and he claimed he talked about having a headache and all. But then he seemed to get better. And they were having a party this one night, and he seemed better, so we took him to the party. And when he came home, he said, "Oh, my head is killing me." And he said to me, then he took a high fever. And he said to me, "Mama, do you think I'm going to die?" And that was upsetting, of course, for him to ask me that, and I don't know what I told him now. But anyway, the next day the next morning when it was daylight, we took him to the doctor's office. And Jim took him in to the doctor's, and I sat out in the lobby, and pretty soon they came out together, and the doctor said, "We're going to have to take him to the hospital, as we think he probably has either polio or meningitis." And I just went numb. I just didn't feel anything. It was the strangest experience. I just didn't feel anything. And here this other lady in the lobby started crying, crying for us. And here I was just numb. And we went to the hospital, took him to the hospital, and while he was in being tested, having a spinal being tested, I told Jim what Danny had said to me the night before. Do you think I'll live? And it broke him up. And he had been intending to talk to Danny about his soul because he didn't know where he stood with the Lord
12
at
years
that
old
time.
at that time, Danny.
He was 12, and he wanted to be sure he was right with God, And he meant to talk to him, but he had broke him up so he couldn't, and he came out. And then I was so concerned about him that for fear that he would be crippled or die or something. And I wanted to stay right by his side. I didn't want to leave, and they let me sit. I couldn't go into his room. He was quarantined. And I'd sit right outside the door with a chair. And I went and bought children's mystery stories. I forgot the name of them, but anyway, there's Christian mystery stories from little boys. And I sat at the door, and they said, now if he moves around much, it's apt to go into his extremities. And he's to be kept quiet. And so I decided I was going to read or do something to keep him quiet. So I would read to him these mystery books while he was there. And then about 2 or 3 days after that, then it hit me. And I went to pieces, and I couldn't go back. The doctor told me my heart started bothering me and everything. The doctor told me I couldn't go back to the hospital for that day. I had to stay home. So Jim had to go see him then.
Well, Dad, what are some of your memories about Dan? What's some of your that you remember back?
Well, he was a terrific basketball player. I would take him down to the boys' club, and he was one of the best ball players they had around there, and had a wonderful time. He's a good baseball player too. But I had this church, and I didn't go watch him play baseball like I did the other kids. And he is quite a pitcher, quite a hitter, and he's quite an athlete. And Danny was a very quiet fella. If I'd say something to him, get after him or scold him, he would just tears come in his eyes. He wouldn't say anything.
Some said that he may have been the best athlete of the boys if he would have stuck with it, but he had such an interest in hunting and fishing that he didn't. He kind of gave some of that up in high school. And talking to some of the old coaches and such,
Well, he said this. Danny said this. If he had came back from California, he regrets this. He said, working on the farm. You see, the 3 boys go down and work on the farm in the summertime. This way they got money to go to college on, the money to spend and so forth. And Danny, he went too, but he come back late. And he was one of the best players they had in the 9th grade football. They come back late, and so he didn't get to play. He didn't go for football anymore. And he made a big mistake there because he'd been a lot better basketball player the last 3 years he had him, but that's one of those things.
But he was of all your boys, he was into hunting and fishing.
Oh, he is a hunter, the fisherman, yeah.
Okay, well then about the littlest boy, what do you remember most about Tom? Me. Can't think of a thing, huh?
No, Tom was always. He was on the table, sitting on the floor. He'd make up games. He had a very meditative mind, and he'd make up games. And he'd games. I don't be dead. Scratch that. But he'd be sitting on the floor, just playing around with himself with games he'd make up. So he was a kid that he was scared of Dad because when he would do something, and I'd take a stick to him, and he had done something outside. I don't remember what it was. And he said, I got after him. He ran in the house. And he ran in the house, and he got in the bathroom, locked the door. And I said, all right, I'm going to sit right out here and wait for you. Boy, Dad's going to hold. And pretty soon he started praying. Oh, God, don't let Daddy get me. Oh, dear Jesus, you help me. don't let Daddy get me. And so I listened to the prayer a little bit, and I said, well, let him go this time. He's asking for help, and I always taught him that pray and the Lord to help him out.
So Tom always liked sports also?
Oh, Tom, boy, we had practiced 25-footers, you know. Boy, he got good at it, what I mean. 25 feet out to the top of the key. And
Still-
boy, he was really sick them out there. I know, yeah, I did 25 at one whack, you know, and he did well in Greenleaf. Then he got a stupid coach over there, and he did well in Greenleaf basketball, and things happened that didn't turn out well.
What about, Mom, what's your memories of the little guy?
Well, I saw an ad on television the other day that sure reminded me of you. I saw some little boys playing. This little boy picked up a hose and he's headed for his dad's automobile and was going to fill a gas tank with this water, and his dad grabbed him just in time. I remember Tommy as a little kid. He and the little neighbor boy next door, they found a gas can out in the garage, so they decided they wanted to fill something up, and there was one of those exhaust pipes that goes down into the dryer that was sticking on the outside, and it looked like a nice place, like a place to put gasoline, you know. And they took that gas can and they poured it down the dryer, and we smelled gas all over the house. We thought our house was going to explode, and we had a gas dryer down there, and it has an open flame somewhere, you know, and I thought sure our house was going to explode, and we found out he had done this. The fire department came, and they examined the house. They said, well, it would never explode because it was not next to the flame, you know. But we had to really air that house out, and we had company, and that was quite an experience. But he had, like Jim said, he had an imaginative mind, and he could always think of things to play, you know. And he was easy to take care of because he could entertain himself. He could entertain himself a lot better than a lot of children could. And that has done him well through the years, because he's been able to apply this to his work in the church and everything, his ability to see things and imagine things that will be helpful, you know.
Okay, just in brief, could you tell us about your boys as adults and who they married and your grandchildren's names, and just real quickly on that subject?
Well, let's see. David had gone on a choir tour while he's in college, and he didn't have any girlfriends at that time. And when he came home, he said to us, you know, he says, Dad, Mom, I met the neatest girl in Flint, Michigan. I didn't get a chance to talk to her very much, but what I did, he says, she was so neat. He said, she's the kind of girl I'd like to marry someday. And it wasn't too long after that her father resigned his church in Flint, Michigan, and the church in Portland, Oregon called him as their pastor. And here he came to the very church that David was going to, and this very girl was there, and a great pianist and a great musician. And he was able to start going with her, and today he's married to that very girl that he said he would like to marry someday, and he'd only seen her casually on a choir tour. It was interesting. Our oldest son is David Michael Dougherty, married to Peggy Dougherty, and I can't tell you what year. My memory does not tell me, but they have two daughters. They have Susan, and Susan has two children. She has a husband, but they're separated. And then there's Sally, and Sally is right now attending Anderson, Indiana University. And they have in the past sung together with their dad. And then there's, let's see, Douglas O'Neill is married to Shirley Dietz, Dougherty now. She was a Dietz. And they have 7 children. And they have Kevin, Chad, Heidi, Ryan, Derek, Danae, and Kyler, who have all done marvelously in school.
And Kevin is married now.
Kevin is now married to Kim. I don't remember what her maiden name was, but anyway, her name is Kim. And they have one member of the family, and that is one of those big old, what do you call them?
English bulldog.
English bulldogs.
Named Homie.
Named what?
Homie.
Homie. Okay. And then, let's see, I got to remember the rest. Daniel Dougherty was married to Christine Vassar, and they had David and Jimmy. Jimmy's the oldest, and then David. And Jimmy right now is 17 and David's 11. And through some very distressful things that happened, he and Chris had to part their ways, and much to his unhappiness, because he always said, Dad, he says, I didn't want to ever bring the sorrow of divorce into our family, but it had to be. And now, presently, not too long ago, over a year and a half or so ago, he married Peggy. What was her name?
Yum.
Yelm, yeah.
Peggy Yelm.
Yeah, Peggy Yum Fudge.
And Peggy Yelm Fudge, and she had something in her past that had happened that was tragic too, and they made a good pair together. They seem to love each other dearly and are getting along fine.
And Peggy's brought a wonderful little boy into their marriage.
Yeah, and she's brought a sweet little boy in with us. That's right, a little Jacob. I don't know what his middle name is, Jacob. And it's spelled differently. It's Jakoub. Jacob Fudge. Right now, Jacob is in Australia with his dad for supposed to be a few more weeks.
He's a professor of school over there.
And then there's our big boy over here, Tom Dougherty, married a lovely lady by the name of Denise. What's her middle name?
Marie.
Denise Marie Ayatt. And they, first of all, had a little boy named Luke, who was a sweet little fellow, and we all loved him so dearly, but a tragic thing happened to him, and he's no longer with us. The Lord took him home, and now we have the sweet, darling little girl by the name of Kaylee Ann. And she brings us a lot of joy.
In fact, Kaylee's here. She can go sit on Mother's lap, and you can get a picture of her.
Oh, come and sit on my lap, Kaylee, so they can see you.
She just got a little swat, so she's not real happy.
Oh, well, she'll be happier. Yeah.
We wish we could show all the grandkids in
She's a
this
sweetie.
video, but because everyone lives miles away, we don't have that opportunity. What years did you pastor this church? 1963 to 19...
Shoot, I don't remember. 60, 67.
63, because I came here with you. 63 to 1980, so that was about
1980.
So
I
17
left in
years.
80. I went over to Washington.
So you're here for 17 years.
17 years.
Boy.
17 years.
What kind of memories you remember from this place?
Oh, a lot of weddings. And a lot of ball games right out here you kids played. And played basketball back there. Practiced shooting foul shots and 25-footers. Was that here? That
Yeah.
was here.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was here.
You still have some friends from this church that you stay in contact with?
Well, Lorne used to come here, but I don't know anybody here now.
No, I mean people that go to the other church that you grew up with in your church here.
What?
the shells and the
Oh, yeah, the
martels.
shells martels and Benny.
Doris
Benny's gone.
Kendall and
Yeah.
Pauline Solomon down the road.
Pauline
comes
Solomon
some,
lived down there.
and Pearl McKinley.
Pearl is still there.
And the Brassies, isn't this where the Brassies started
Yep.
coming to church
Back
at?
in,
Yeah.
must have been about 78,
78.
77, I think. It might have been 77.
A lot of friends, a lot of memories. Cecil Groff and Harold. Cecil's
Yeah.
still
Cecil,
alive.
Yeah, Cecil's still alive. Harold. Danny used to catch big old trout out of the stream here. Throw them away, not good to eat, you know. Big stream.
Well, I'll never forget one Sunday when it was during the World Series, or not the World Series, World's, what was that, Olympics. And the United States hockey team beat the Russian hockey team. And Dad was outside in the car listening to the radio. And it was right after your dad got done with the prayer. He comes in and makes the announcement, the United States hockey team just won.
Is that right?
Yeah, it was pretty neat.
A lot of memories, a lot of time, 17 years. This is where he spent most of his time at this church.
Yeah.
And then after he left, they built the new church, which I guess we'll look at in a few minutes.
Yeah. That was back in 1984 they built that.
Yeah.
Well, Danny and Chris had a fight here one time, and he went off down that way. And Chris, she walked down looking for him, couldn't find Quebec. Said, I think Danny fell in the creek. I think he's drowned. I think he's drowned. And he come walking around. Allie shouted about real well too. Married a lot of people here.
Yeah. All right, let's take and pause it here. Let's go on.
Okay, there's James Dougherty, age 83 years and almost 1 month old. Spent 17 years of his life at this church. Now we sold to another place called New Life Celebration, also a Church of God. And next to the church there is the old parsonage, which they've redone since we lived there from '63 for a few years. And now it's used as a family center for this church, but that used to be our home. And right behind you, behind all these bushes, I don't think you're going to be able to see very well, but is our other home that we lived in here. We didn't have all these trees before, but this is kind of the start of it. And don't get yourself in trouble peeking in. This is the old 12th and Arthur property that James and Doris Dougherty spent 17 years at, and her kids.
Well, we had
Okay, so so Mom and Dad, you lived here from 1974 to 1980.
That's right.
And
That's
would you
right.
buy this place for, I think it was
that'd be 6 years.
$27,900?
That's right.
And you got it paid off, and you paid triple payments, if I remember right, for a while there to get this thing paid off fairly early. And now this has been kind of your retirement income.
Yes, it's helped.
So it's
an
turned
awful
out
lot.
turned out quite a bit. Any remembers you remember about this house? Oh, I bet there are some.
Well, there was Randy. We took him in when he was here, and
And you bought him a gerbil or something for Christmas or birthday, didn't you?
Hamster.
Hamster.
And it had
they
six,
had,
Bought him a hamster.
that had 16
And
babies
some of the
about
babies
6
fell
weeks
out on
later.
the floor and it killed him.
Don't remember that part, but I remember getting bitten in the nose by his hamster.
is that right?
Yeah. Who lived next door to you? Why did you buy this place?
For
Well-
mother, so we keep mother.
So your mother,
That's why she
your
lived
mother
there
Grace
for a while.
That's why
Johnson.
we bought it.
So Grandma lived
Yeah.
there for a long time, and then
Yeah.
She lived in one side and we lived in the other.
and then Tom and I lived there with Randy for a while, and Dad and Mom's side on 2017, and then moved in with Grandma for a while, let Randy stay at home, and then you finally sold out and moved to Ellensburg, Washington.
I don't think we
That's
lived
right.
in with mother, did we?
No, you didn't.
No, no.
Oh, Rand.
I did.
Oh, you did.
Yeah.
Okay.
Any other memories you remember about this place?
Well,
There's some good tomatoes out there. They're
Around
the
back?
best eggplants ever grown. I got one had 4 little eggplants on it. Boy, that year it yielded 34 eggplants. It did real well in tomatoes. And
So this
forth.
place is actually on we call it prime farmland
Yeah.
in the middle of the city.
Our neighbor, our renter now, she is raising tomatoes, and Jim said her vines look really good. I haven't seen them.
Yeah, they're the best.
And this is the
So,
what 19th of July today or 20?
21st.
Oh, 21st of July today, 1999. And currently, as we talked to Mom and Dad in front of this house, this duplex is for sale. We're trying to sell it so we can move on in life and not have to worry about it anymore. But it's been a good income and a nice home for me growing up through my senior year of high school and early years of college, and had a lot of many memories of Mom and Dad and I sitting around rubbing each other's feet and back, and and Mom making those great meals, and Dad praying those long prayers.
And you were
You still praise
going
him.
with a girl too. We said, well, Tommy, we don't think this is a proper girl you go with. And he looked at it, he said, hey, I'm big enough to take care of myself now. But a few weeks later, he come back and said, boy, that girl about ate me up.
We'll forget that part.
Forget that.
This is where Gino and I started
I'm
running
not
around
gonna go with
together.
her anymore.
Spent some time together, picking me up and going out and getting our triples and
No, he said he had to fight for
fries and Twinkies, and it's made us
Baskin
to,
Robbins.
it's made us to the men we are today.
Yeah. We've lost our full potential.
Yeah. Well, from here, I think let's head up to Canyon Hill and check out another home Mom and Dad lived in.
All right.
Yeah, 2.5 years.
2.5 years
Yeah.
is all.
Tell me when you're ready.
Whenever it's going.
Full
Okay.
cheer.
Yeah, Mom and Dad lived here from approximately 1969 or so to 1971, somewhere in there. It was about 2.5 years they lived here. Small 2-bedroom house. Dan and I both lived here with them, and it was a nice home for us. We enjoyed it. Had a lot of friends over from here, and Mom and Dad bought it for how much, Dad?
$12.50.
$12,500, and then they sold it to my brother Dan 2.5 years later for $18,000, and then Dan held on to it for a few years and sold it for $30,000, and now we notice it's for sale again, and this is in 1999, and it is for sale for $64,900. So I guess the inflation has kind of gone up. Is there any special memories about this place? You remember, Dad? The Brunels used to live next door.
Yeah, that's Candy. I married her off. And she has a nice boy just as old as Danny. Jim. And she lives there yet. What I mean, she had married a couple times. I married her once, but some performed the ceremony for her. But we enjoyed this. Hardy's put in the air conditioning for us.
On Hardy's, yeah, I went to the Caldwell
Yeah.
Church for
Yeah.
years, yeah.
Yeah, he put in the Hardy. We enjoyed the place. And then this new, real estate lady, I forgot what her name is, said, "Oh, you ought to buy this duplex." We still went $28,000 for it. So
27.9,
we
yeah.
looked at it, and so we bought the thing.
Dave Wixom stayed with us a little while we lived here, with me in the bedroom.
He did.
Yeah.
I don't remember that, but
Yeah. And we had some nice older neighbors that lived behind us here. Of course,
oh yeah, they were.
I'm sure they're probably Mennonites, weren't they?
Mennonite. Yeah.
I think they're probably gone now.
Yeah.
They were quite old at the time.
Yeah, I see their son once in a while.
Oh, do you?
Yeah.
So anyway, that's kind of nice. Well, now Jim and Doris's third son, Dan, lives right down the street on Terrace Drive. In fact, we'll stop over their place so Dad can use the restroom and take a look at it.
All right.
See over there, and then they have the fireworks. They watch it from upstairs, and they have beautiful scenery from there, clear back there. But I don't know what those two poplar trees are going to do.
Okay.
Downside. And they have a pool table in there.
Whose house are we at?
Huh?
Whose house is this?
This is Dan Dougherty's house, and Peggy's, and David and little Jacob, her little boy, Peggy's little girl boy.
Who's that guy there?
That's my baby. That's Thomas. Look at that chest roll out there. Hey there. He's the one that looks after us a lot, this boy.
4,500 square foot house
Boy.
with a garage.
What's the garage?
And a view.
Beautiful view.
So
Beautiful.
is this what they call a room with a view?
This is room with a view.
Room with a view, and they fireworks. in Eagle or wherever they are over there, they see them from the window. That's quite a view.
All right,
Beautiful.
now we're going to head over to the new church.
Oh, head with the other
That's
church
our
to
new
see what
church.
it's like. Isn't that beautiful?
Beautiful view.
Oh boy. I don't know. Someone said this car. We just thank the Lord that thou will be watch over this. He brings his family here and there, takes other people. Bless this automobile. May it give him great service. And bless this home here and their loved ones too. Bless Jean for helping us today. Lord, we love thee. Thank you, Jesus. Amen.
And here's the great man that's represented by the plaque.
Yeah, this is May the 5th, 1985. James W. Dougherty. W stands for William. Gymnasium. And a building named after me. And that's something.
He never pastored this church, but always pastored the church downtown for all those years.
I
And
pastored one downtown.
made it possible to build this church in the future, and so they graciously named the church after him. We had a big celebration that day. All the brothers and families and people from the past and present were there. Kind of interesting, people from the present being there, since some weren't born yet.
Well, Dad, George Dougherty, and Nora's in the plaque inside.
This church is doing
Yeah.
very well now.
I just hope that the Lord helps them to build a sanctuary some of these days. They need
All in due time. When they're ready, it'll come too when it's ready.
when it's ready.
Yeah. Lord willing, it's
Lord willing. It
Yeah.
takes a lot of money.
sure does. Okay.
Commissioner said it's out there, so I talked to the police. I asked him if he wanted me to do himself. He told me he was Bushnell that had it against him. Okay. Thanks, Glenn.
You're welcome.
Jesus.